Alright, I'd say let's get right into this. The first thing I saw was Lupin, this new Netflix TV show, and my initial impression was that I've never heard French pronounced so French before, if that even makes sense. It feels like the language has so much character, it sets the whole tone of the show. It's charming and playful melody, a little nonchalant and absent-minded. Just hear him pronounce "pronom" while keeping your composure. Even Alain Delon couldn't make me want to speak in a French accent so much. And yeah, admittedly the logic is kind of fairy tale-like, but does it really matter? The episodes are fast-paced, entertaining, and snappily edited, that you don't really have the time left to meditate and poke holes through all the plot conveniences, which I guess are abundant, but the film embraces the over-the-top, semi-realistic nature of the world and makes the joyful child in me more engaged and interested in the characters actually pulling off all those stunts that they do. I mean, yeah, the Superman masks himself by wearing a pair of glasses, just accept it. I think that the characters make the show, specifically led by a charismatic and funny performance from Omar Sy. I mean, just look at his chair. If this doesn't tell you how amazing this guy is, then I really don't know what will. Then next I turn on Malcolm and Marie, and I was really quite pumped for this ever since the trailer dropped unexpectedly. The cinematography looked great, the character drama seemed intense, Alabama Shakes was playing in the background, damn, I was ready. And the movie did start very interesting, the setting was intimate and personal, the arguments initially had weight and felt impactful. I really felt invested. It had some of that 12 Angry Men potential. Have you ever seen a man chewing mac and cheese that intensely? You can drink that milkshake all you want, Daniel, but can you demolish a bowl of noodles with such passion? But regrettably, around the halfway mark, everything started simmering down. It felt like the arguments had nowhere else to go naturally anymore, but continued until you started hating the characters for the drama queens that they are. I felt like the initial grand idea, the emotional depth of the argument got muddled up in the details that they try to pick at in order to maintain that same level of energy. Still, great visuals and jazzy performances kept me anxious and engaged enough till the end. Next up, this Scandinavian dark comedy action piece, Riders of Justice, led by Mads Mikkelsen, which I managed to catch at Rotterdam International Film Festival at opening night. If we focus our attention purely on the plot, I do not think there would be much to say. It's a revenge story with familiar and predictable twists and turns, and a couple of Hollywood cliches peppered in. I think what actually helps the film is its budgetary limitations to follow Hollywood. It has a charming amateurish aesthetic where you can't quite reach Hollywood, and thus you focus on creative solutions to say more or shift focus to characters rather than spectacle. There isn't really a typical hero in this story. Everyone is broken up and mentally very, very unwell. The film has this dirtiness and ruggedness that Hollywood cannot seem to pull off that easy. They always need the hero to look good even when he's breaking down and at his worst. Here, the characters get to cry and humiliate themselves, and it's pathetic and ugly, but in the right way, you know? The film starts as a detective with some heist elements, then dips a little into action, and then becomes an analysis of grief and trauma with broken people trying to live and cope together, simultaneously hating each other, but also finding comfort in each other's presence. This way sort of finding itself into an ending, which is one of the saddest, most uncomfortable happy endings I have seen. It's filled with this dark European grit and melancholy, but not in a fetishized way. That's something I think Hollywood quite often misses to capture translating that type of stories to screen. The most prominent example of this being The Witcher, which is just a little too polished for my taste. Mikkelsen does feel a little wasted, acting as a restrained and conservative military dude, until he breaks down about the middle point and then comes back to being a little wasted again. General thoughts? It's a good refresher to someone who's a little too bored of the popular dark comedy action entertainment, but doesn't quite want too much of that avant-garde bullshit. Then I bought a VPN and turned on Amazon Prime in the US, and Vivarium snatched my attention. The premise of the film is quite inventive. It portrays the process of settling down as the scariest horror young people have to face. It deconstructs the societal pressure of being in a couple nowadays, which I think is an idea quite interesting. A wonderful performance from the estate agent in the film takes us from normal to quite uncomfortable and awkward to even frightening and eerie. And it's exciting and suspenseful, but once the intro is done, the film turns to a very predictable territory. The setting of jail-like suburbs has definitely been seen before, and the analogies are a little too corny and in your face. It also doesn't help that the location is monotone and repetitive, and I guess it kind of portrays the banality of life, but I don't know, it just doesn't change the fact that it gets quite difficult to get through with about the middle point. I think the major flaw of the film is its lack of subtlety in messages. There isn't really much to get from a repeating viewing, I think. Most ideas are either blatantly blurted out by the characters or presented in obvious visuals and only touched upon on a surface level, as if they weren't even authentic themselves to the creator. I felt like you could go so much further and weirder with the theme. I mean, Lobster kind of tackles the similar societal pressures of being in a couple, but in a much more amusing and original way. And make it terrifying, make it crazy, make it out of this world. And the movie kind of goes for it in the last 5 minutes, but that isn't enough after 1.5 hours of sort of pandering. Okay, let's go into a more peaceful territory. Let's talk about Nomadland. This is a very gentle film. Not a lot of words are spoken, but you feel very intimate with the main character. Frances McDormand refuses to blabber and speaks mostly in facial expressions and body language. It's amazing how you can communicate full and expressive sentences if you prefer silence. It reminded me of the main character Billy Bob Thornton plays in The Man Who Wasn't There, which his refusal to just speak a single word is quite amusing to watch.
Cigarette? Right.
The film feels documentarian in its presentation of the nomad lifestyle. There is a lot of solitude and quiet peacefulness captured in the sweeping shots. A wide depth of field makes it impossible to separate the character from its environment. A person looks humble and alone, a small part of nature's whole. I guess the best way to describe the mood is it's an accessible entry drug Terrence Malick sort of film. It's a very meditative aesthetic, not focusing as much on the plot, but on the tranquility of the moment. I feel like movies like this are often very divisive. They need to either sweep you in and entrance your senses, or you're left a little bored picking apart quite a shoestring plot. You really need to experience this one without distractions, so if you do intend to watch the film, please pick a quiet afternoon. The music felt a little too melodramatic for my taste, with only a single piano slowly pacing the keyboard on a high octave. I guess it makes sense to break down the point of isolation and loneliness in the film, but I just can't help but feel a little cheap and manipulative, especially during the more dramatic moments. Unexpectedly, the film made an interesting companion piece to Vivarium. It showed people refusing to settle down and let go by trying to escape the routine finality of life around them. Then, funnily enough, I got drafted to the army, and I saw Cherry was coming up, so kind of felt like seeing it. Did not put my mind at ease, I can tell you that. I think you'd first notice how edgy the film is, but not in a very charming way. It's a little too flashy and blatant in the visuals. I think it lacks the grit that Trainspotting had, which allowed it to be that vibrant. I think the film wants to say a little too much and gets quite muddled up. Is it about the love story, or is it about the army and PTSD, or is it actually about drug addiction? I think none of these parts had enough of a focus to show something original and authentic. The direction felt too detached and glossy without the emotional depth that comes from a director bringing his unique experience to the situation. It felt like someone retelling the story of a friend of a friend. It's still interesting, also quite funny, but it just isn't that when the person retelling the story has not participated in that situation. I guess what I'm trying to say is it just doesn't feel genuine. And if you do decouple those separate themes of the film, the army was deconstructed better in Full Metal Jacket, the drug use in Requiem for a Dream, and a good romantic story, just throw a rock. I think what I'm trying to say is, I do not think I'll ever see the film again, and due to its lack of authenticity, it will likely be forgotten. What does lift the material up and keeps us engaged for those 2.5 hours is Tom Holland. He's just incredibly likable and easy to root for. And it is a very easy movie to watch, juggling some serious problems, but on too surface of a level, making you feel too comfortable and entertained observing something like this. I just have a few words about the end. If Baby Driver made an over-the-top parody poking fun at how overused and cliche the type of ending is, maybe you should have tried something else. And then I got around to watching Small Axe, which is a series of 5 films directed by Steve McQueen. I decided to start with Red, White, and Blue. This is definitely not the first story about a man going against the system to change the status quo, but it's very contained and personal, allowing for emotional intimacy and depth. It puts a very fresh perspective on the story by pushing the main character in between the front lines to suffer shots from both sides. Joining the police force, John Boyega faces expected internal racism, ignorance, and opposition, but most importantly, he faces hate from his own community. The deep-rooted anger between the sides is so ingrained that becoming a constable can't be seen as anything but betrayal. The people he seeks to protect and help turn their backs in misunderstanding. Filled with anger, disappointment, and doubt, it's a testament to persistence, character strength, and most importantly, the love and support, yet sometimes scarce and out of breath, from people we hold closest. The community-level conflict is beautifully reflected by the intimate standoff between father and son, leading to a sobbingly powerful ending played beautiful on Boyega's face. You can always trust Steve McQueen to deliver creativity visual storytelling. The whole conflict can be played out just on the characters' faces without uttering a word. He always knows when to show, not to show, or obscure certain actions on screen just to keep our imaginations engaged. Even exposition and character is delivered through details in people's environment. Top it off with a soulful soundtrack and you've got an emotional and thoughtful experience to shake you up. Thank you for watching.